6 years and 1 day after Hitler invaded. On September 2, 1945, 6 years and 1 day after Hitler invaded Poland, Japan formally surrendered. The true death toll of World War II will never be known, nor the names of its first or last victims. But those who lived and died during this conflict are its real story, not the tanks that stalled, nor the planes that failed to fly, nor the ships that remained docked without them. War is fundamentally about people, soldiers and civilians from cities and villages across jungles and deserts, allies who were once strangers and neighbors turned enemies. For over 6 years, hundreds of millions endured a living hell on Earth. Germany swiftly overran Europe, isolating the UK. While Switzerland and Sweden remained neutral and Spain was sympathetic, the rest of the continent either fell under occupation or aligned with Hitler. He now ruled an empire with a population larger than that of the US. Turning eastward, Hitler launched a new kind of war, an ideological, racial war aimed at annihilation. Between January and June 1941, 17,000 trains transported German troops to the Soviet border, including 3,000 special units tasked with exterminating so-called racial enemies. On January 9th, Hitler told his generals that Russia's vast lands held untold riches, predicting their forces would sweep across like a hailstorm. Inspired by the U.S. treatment of Native Americans, he saw Ukraine as Germany's future breadbasket. By March 30th, in a speech to 200 senior commanders, Hitler declared a war of extermination. German generals later tried to absolve the Wehrmacht of war crimes, but the army followed orders from the beginning. Political commissars were to be executed on sight. Orders reflected cold calculations. Tens of millions were expected to starve or be deported. Nazi plans for Belarus allowed only 25% of its population to survive. Stalin, despite receiving 80 warnings and 180 airspace violations, dismissed the threat, viewing it as British propaganda. Confident in victory, Hitler reallocated arms production from the army to the Air Force, believing the USSR would fall swiftly. Operation Barbarossa began at 3:30 a.m. on June 22, 1941. Stalin was asleep. German divisions invaded the Soviet Union, claiming Russia had attacked first. The invasion was vast and sudden. By day's end, Italy and Romania had joined the war. Finland and Hungary followed days later. Nazi bombers destroyed hundreds of Soviet aircraft on the ground. Initial German advances were devastating. Despite these setbacks, Stalin called upon the Russian people to resist. Factories increased output. In response, German forces intensified their brutality. Entire villages were destroyed. Jews were massacred in towns and fields. In July, 30,000 Jews were murdered in Kaunas alone. These massacres marked the beginning of the Holocaust in the East. German forces suffered from logistical issues. Dust and wear disabled tanks. Still, the Red Army's defenses crumbled. Minsk fell by late June. Smolensk followed in mid-July. Millions of Soviet troops were captured or killed, yet resistance continued. Despite high expectations, the Nazi invasion began to falter. The vastness of Soviet territory and continued resistance took their toll. By August, doubts emerged among German leaders. The Soviets began their first counteroffensives. The myth of a quick victory faded. Hitler remained confident, saying Germany would never retreat. At the same time, partisan warfare escalated. Orders from Himmler demanded mass executions. By mid-July, thousands of Jews were being systematically killed. Civilians suffered immensely. Stalin, recognizing the war's existential threat, shifted rhetoric from communism to nationalism. He remained in Moscow even as the city braced for invasion. Soviet counterattacks intensified. As winter set in, the Germans were unprepared. Temperatures dropped to 40°C. Vehicles failed. Frostbite and starvation became widespread among troops and civilians alike. The Red Army launched major offensives. Slowly, the tide turned. Soviet numbers grew. German divisions were decimated. The failure to capture Moscow marked a critical turning point. Then came December 7, 1941. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. America entered the war. Within hours, over 2,400 Americans were killed. The U.S. shifted from peace to total war. The Japanese missed key targets, including U.S. aircraft carriers, but politically the attack galvanized the American people. Roosevelt addressed Congress on December 8th, calling December 7th a date which will live in infamy. Congress voted overwhelmingly for war. From a 100,000-strong army, the U.S. would mobilize nearly 15 million military personnel. World War II became truly global. The scale of destruction, suffering, and sacrifice was unprecedented. It was a war of annihilation, but also of endurance. And so, 6 years and 1 day after it began, it ended with Japan's surrender, closing a chapter of history written in blood, fire, and human resilience.